So, Isabel, you were talking about some of these identifying stressors that people go through to become aware of what's starting to transpire so they can capture or catch this behavior before it becomes kind of into the negative zone. And you used a bit of an analogy with me on kind of like a traffic light. It's the red, yellow, green color schedule and how to be more cognizantly aware. So, could you expand on what that looks like for people so they have a bit more understanding for how to recognize these things as they come up in life?
Yeah, so we talk about the awareness piece. So I have this scale called the feel good scale that really has you look at levels of consciousness. So there's the red zone, yellow zone, and green zone. So the red zone is when you are in the stress response. And in the stress response, it's where all the signals that I was talking about, your body thinks you're in danger, even if it's just your partner that didn't empty the dishwasher, or you're running late for work, or maybe you have your children are being cranky or whatever it is, right? We are misinterpreting the seriousness of danger. And when we live chronically in the red zone, that's when health issues occur, like my adrenal exhaustion, all the things that occur. So what you learn to track is which zone are you in. So that's the awareness piece. Like you track yourself all day long, at least a few times a day. I'm in the red zone, the green zone, or the yellow zone, which is in the middle. Oh, the yellow zone is the best place in the world. In the green zone, who we want to be, who we aspire to be, that's where we live. In the green zone, you can be creative and inspired and loving and kind, and you feel like so my whole work is about how to recognize if you're in red or yellow and bring yourself back to green. If you're the type of human being that wants to be your best self, which I
Mhm.
imagine your listeners are. So once you realize you're either in the red zone, in the stress response, or heading there, you then practice 3 steps, which are really easy to remember because they go with the traffic light metaphor. So, what do we do? Red, we stop. So, step number one, if you notice, like this morning, like, oh, I'm starting to notice I'm starting to get irritable and I'm wanting to eat. I'm like, stop. And the stop is remember, don't take any action
Mm.
because the way you're seeing and feeling is distorted. It's being distorted by the stress response. So everything is becoming exaggerated. So don't trust what you think, feel, or want to do. Just stop. Okay. Okay. Second step, think yellow, slow down and breathe, right? Yielding. So you start telling your nervous system through the slow, deep abdominal breath that you're actually not in danger, that you don't need to be in the stress response right now. And slow abdominal breathing is the fastest way to tell your body that. Like, even listen to how my voice changes when I start talking about that. And then the final step is go. And go for what I call is a feel good habit versus a false good habit. A false good habit is something you do to feel immediately better, but that
Mhm.
usually has negative consequences. A feel good habit is one that brings you to the red zone. You can call it a healthy habit. I like feel good better. And so a feel good habit, like I got up and I went and I made myself a cup of tea and I took a few minutes and then eventually came back down. It could be calling a friend. It could be taking a bath. It could be, depends where you are. If you're at work, you can just get up and go to the bathroom. Or, if you can, go outside and walk for 10 minutes. It can be a 1 minute thing or it can be a 2 hour thing, whatever time you've got. And so, right, remember awareness. What zone am I in? Action. Take the 3 steps. Stop, slow down and breathe. Go. If you're in the green zone by then, nothing else you need to do. If it didn't work and you're still like, yeah, I like went down to the yellow zone, but all right, you can do the thing again. And and eventually over time, Richard, what I've seen in myself and others is we teach our nervous system to go back to the green zone at will.
Mhm.
And that's the thing. People who struggle with chronic stress get stuck in the rut of chronic stress. That's the problem. The problem isn't stress, is that we get stuck in stress. So every time we notice and we shift, we're getting our brains to become more agile and more adaptable. And so that when it hits a real stressor, it can do what it needs to do, but then it can come back to the green zone. And so that's really the greatest outcome. We become regulated with our nervous systems instead of dysregulated.
It's interesting. I like how you identified, the where people really develop problems with being stuck in stress because stress on its own isn't actually bad. It's actually a very powerful thing. If we think about the simple act of working out, you want to build muscle, where you're actually putting stress on the muscles. You're creating micro tears so that the body can go back and heal those things to build on top of what's there. that you wouldn't be able to get a buildup effect if you didn't have a degree of stress. So, what I think I hear you saying is that you want to control the way that stress is appearing in your life by being able to manage, not even manage the stress, but to redirect the stress signals in a way that brings you back to a positive outcome. And you want to be able to
Yeah.
do that on a repeated basis. And by doing it repeatedly, it's like training. It's like going to the gym and doing the same workout on a regular basis. So you develop that habit and that routine. And that routine level, once you develop it, that's the thing about habits. People are 100% disciplined in their habits. It's just which habits are they that you
Which
want? Are they the
habits?
habits that are beneficial to you, the habits that aren't? The other thing you kind of mentioned is, the green being the choice to make it a positive action, where I think what it sounds like the people who are stuck in stress is they're probably doing that same red, yellow, green, but the green thing that they're choosing isn't a positive outcome. It's usually a negative outcome.
Correct.
So like, eating, let's say you're stressed, you're having a good day. So what do? You go to get the cookie jar or the bag of chips and you sit on the couch and you deal with it that way, which isn't necessarily creating the positive result that you're looking for.
Yeah, that's why I love calling them false good. Have you ever heard of false gods? False gods, it's like they promise themselves to be the Trojan horse. They promise that they're going to be good, but behind is danger. And so false good habit temporarily brings you to the green zone, but then brings you back to the red because now you feel stuffed and you don't feel good, or if you've yelled at somebody. So that's why false good or feel good. Um, the thing that I wanted to say about stress, there are two things I want to say about what you said. One is most of the time, our brains exaggerate the stress we're under and exaggerates to bring us into the stress response. So that's one thing. This work makes you realize we're actually not in danger as often as the brain. The brain is outdated. It's got an evolutionary glitch. It still thinks we're cave people living in times where we have to fight, flight all the time, right? So that's one. We often exaggerate. The second thing is, even when the stress is that difficult, I have many people going through my work. They go through difficult divorces. I have 3 of my facilitators that I've trained in my work are going through cancer. I mean, there's just, there's so much. So even under real stress, you can learn to be a green zone human being. You can learn to actually get yourself regulated, that you can be with these really difficult circumstances and still not be kidnapped by stress, right? So, 2 things. Often stresses are not as high as our bodies think. And 2, even if they are, there's a different way to be. Jack Canfield talks about, he has a formula that says event plus response equals outcome. Right. And he says, Isabel, your methodology is the best response methodology I've ever seen. Because, like, there's an event, I have cancer. How do you respond to it? Do you respond from the red zone or the green zone? And the green zone doesn't mean you're like rainbows and unicorns. It means you stay calm, you stay grounded, you stay present, you
Mm.
get information. In the red zone, you freak out, you panic, you have worst case scenarios running through your head, and so if you have an event and a green zone response, that's going to create a different outcome than an event and a red zone response. That's going to create a very different outcome.
Yeah, very interesting. It kind of reminds me. I had an interview with an amazing gentleman on one of the episodes, Russell Schmidt, who is a former coach with Strategic Coach Organization, and he was a 3-time cancer survivor. And
Oh,
so he had to go through that experience a number of times. And he talked about it similarly in that way. It's like, well, what's within my control? What can I control? We'll just control that. And he also just fundamentally just felt like, no, I'm just going to tell cancer not today. you know, it's you don't get to run my life. I run my life, and I'm going to do it the way that I want, not the way that you want. So he had a very like hard line experience on how he wanted to treat cancer, not how he wanted cancer to treat him.
yeah, I love that. Like, right. And that's the whole thing. It's respond versus react. That's really what my work does. It teaches you to respond to circumstances consciously, choice. That's why it's called choice point, versus react. React is we have no choice. And that's the thing. In the red zone, we lose the power of choice. Our frontal cortex gets kidnapped so that we don't think, we just act. And so we can't think straight. We can't make conscious choice. So we've got to stop, not take action from that. Because if we take action from the red zone, we will create something that is not going to be supported. We stop, slow down and breathe, and then take action. You see the difference? If we take action from the red zone, unless you're in actual danger, you're going to create turbulence in your life.
Hmm.
In
Yeah.
actual danger, the red zone is amazing, right? If you're in front
Well,
of a bear or a killer, it is really good to act from the red zone.
yeah, I mean, I think that's the reason those instincts are there is self-preservation and
Exactly.
you know, it's fight or flight scenario, but designed in such a way to keep you safe. That's what it's really there for. And so
That
I
is
think
correct.
fundamentally in our modern world society, the communication that we have with people, our lives are so much different than a fight or flight scenario. You know, if we go back thousands of years, but we're still living it, and we're now creating these fight or flight responses through unseen activities that wouldn't materialize like a, you know, like a lion in the jungle or what have you. We're, you know, now it's that email that came in, that's the lion in the jungle that's attacking you, which is a different experience, but you're it's creating a similar outcome, you know, physiologically.
If we want to get really fancy and lofty, I think that we are slowly but surely changing our brain structure because I think somebody helped. I called it an evolutionary glitch. And I forget his name. He's a very famous doctor that belongs to this group I belong to. And he's like, yes, that's the word. It's like we have a brain that's still way too oriented towards the limbic system, which is the old evolutionary brain that goes into fight or flight and overdoes it. And I think that every time we do this work, whether you use my methodology or other work, and bring yourself back to the green zone, bring yourself back to conscious response, we are changing the brain of our human species. And hopefully, we're going to have a species soon enough that's going to be primarily a thoughtful, conscious, responsible species instead of reactive, impulsive, destructive. That's one of the reasons I do this work.
Amazing. Well, and we're going to talk more about the work and some of the things you're working on when we come back after this incredible break.